All right. Well, again, good morning and welcome to Junction Community Church this morning. So great to be able to gather together. So grateful for all that God continues to do in our hearts and in our lives. Now, we're nearing the end of this season of, we've been in this summer message series that we're calling Summer Playlist, and there's been a lot of different dynamics to it, and we've kind of just shared different messages along the way, and it's been really powerful, really encouraging, and God has spoken to us through it, and as we near the end of this, I'm looking forward to what's ahead. So let me give you a couple of kind of preview moments for what's ahead in September. Number one, we are starting a brand new series that we're calling, where we're going to discover the I am statements of Christ. It comes from the book of John, and Jesus makes 7 I am statements. And we're going to go through, and we're going to unpack those in the month of September. We're going to start, and I believe God's going to speak to us in a really powerful and unique way through that in terms of understanding who Christ is and what all those statements mean. I'm really looking forward to it. Also, in the month of September, we're kicking off our small groups. And so small group season is here, and I'm excited about it. In fact, personally, I'm doing a new small group this year that I'm excited for. It's just straight up old school Bible study. Like it's like there's not going to be a fancy book. There's not going to be a fancy curriculum to it. No videos, none of the frills and fluff and all that. It's just Bible study. And I'm excited. I'm gonna do something that I haven't done before, and I think God is going to use it as a tool to strengthen us in our faith. And so I want to encourage you. We're going to talk a lot about small groups here today, but I want to encourage you to start praying about and thinking about a group, either that you're going to get involved in, or maybe God is leading you to actually start a group. But whatever the case is, I would challenge you as we think through that today. Now, last week, we talked about suffering and trials and how God uses those things to develop in us perseverance, character, and hope. Like, none of us like trials or suffering, right? Not when we're going through it. We're all looking for the path of least resistance. Like, it's just like, we all want to be bodybuilders, but we don't want to put in the hard work of it, right? Like, in our minds, we're like, I want to look that way, but we don't have the discipline or the commitment to that. The point is this, though, is that we're always looking for, in life, the path of least resistance. That's just the nature of it. That's what we're doing. We're looking for that. And we don't want to go through the trials and the suffering, but God uses those things in our lives. In fact, our takeaway from last week was this: our pain and suffering lead to God's purpose and development in our lives. And so our pain and suffering lead to God's purpose and development in our lives. Like, we don't think about that too often. Oftentimes, we're only thinking about the pain of those moments, right? The suffering of those moments. And what we have to realize is God uses all those things to strengthen us. God uses all of those things that we go through to build us. And so therefore, in life, it's critical that as we go through these moments, we look for God. That in the middle of trial, in the middle of struggle, in the middle of fighting through those things, we look for God. Because in those moments, He's trying to develop us. And we don't always know why, right? We're like, one of the first questions that we come to when we talk about developing our faith or rather walking through trials, we want to ask why. But it's not why in the sense of teach me something, it's more why me. And what we do with that is we say, why me? And we associate with that it's because God's trying to punish me. A lot of times, that's the narrative we live in. It's like God's mad at me, God's getting back at me. God isn't that kind of God, just letting you know this morning. He's not out to get you. He's not out to punish you. He's not out to harm you. He's not out to get you at all. That's a false narrative. In fact, I would say this: as we go through trials, we have to know that God is not only for us, but He's also with us. That He's both with us and He's for us in our lives. And we have to look to Him to reveal Himself in the middle of trials, in the middle of struggles, in the middle of suffering. And as we do, we can have the confidence that Jesus said what? He said, in this life, you're going to have trials. But take heart, I have overcome the world. And so we take heart and we know that He has overcome the world, and that gives us great strength. Now, when we go through various trials, okay, when we go through sufferings and difficulties and trials of all kinds in our lives, we have to have, again, the confidence that God is not only with us but for us, and He gives us community to find strength with one another, to find strength as we journey through life together. In addition, God brings us this community whereby we find strength and encouragement and support. In fact, let me say this. God did not design us to live in isolation and alone. That's not the way God designed us. God did not design us to live isolated lives where we're alone. He, on the contrary, designed us to live and thrive in the context of life-giving community. God has designed us that way. He's designed us to live in the context of life-giving community. And that's probably been the most difficult thing that we've all gone through during this COVID season, is that we've been isolated and separated. Community and interaction have been discouraged in an attempt to minimize the spread of the virus. And we're all doing our part. And I mean, you look at the numbers in Mesa County, and we're doing pretty good when you compare Mesa County to the rest of the world, to the rest of the state. We're doing a pretty good job. Go ahead, give yourselves a big round of applause for that. That's awesome. But in this season, we've minimized community. And we've done it for a good reason, but let me say this, it's disrupted the continuity of community in our lives. It's caused disruption. In my opinion, it has taken a toll on us individually. It's taken a toll on us as a church. It's taken a toll on us as a community. And as we navigate the uncertain waters of what's ahead of us, it's critical that we focus on community in our lives. It's critical. Because I don't know what's ahead of us. You know, I don't know that in the next couple of months we might revert back to a stay-at-home order, and we might not be able to gather in these kind of public gatherings like this. I don't know. But what I do know is that whatever the case is, whatever's ahead of us, it's imperative that we focus on life-giving community. It's imperative that we don't just go through the motions of allowing this to separate us from one another, but that ultimately we fight for community. And I'm not talking about just fighting for gathering in a place. I'm not talking about that. That's one element that might be a part of it. But I'm talking about we fight for community. That means we get in each other's lives and we say, hey, I've missed you. And where have you been? And how are you? And what's going on in your life? And you know, I've seen your life through the lens of social media, but I've missed you. Like, how's life treating you, and what are you going through? And what we're going to find out is that we got all kinds of craziness going on in our lives, right? Like, that's the reality. But we're in this together. God didn't call us to live in this or operate in this alone. And so when we look to the truth of the Bible, we find over and over again that community is emphasized, that God emphasizes community, that God makes that God so speaks and communicates throughout His Word, and He emphasizes this reality of community, that we're to live with one another. We also see that in isolation or a lack of community, that the enemy does his best work in that moment, that the enemy does his best work when we are isolated, when we are alone, when we're by ourselves. And this is so true in many ways. In fact, let me look to one text and then give you an example. Okay, so we're going to look to Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, and it says this. It says, the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone, and all the men said, amen. Okay, good. The first service was not awake, and they're in trouble now. So, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. And again, all the men said, amen. Yeah. And what happens here is that, let me just give some context. The Lord creates, in Genesis chapter 1, there's the 7 days of creation, and at the end of every day, He would say, it is good. It is good. Day 1, it is good. Day 2, it is good. Day 3, it is good. All the way through day 7, it is good. And the first time the Lord says anything about something not being good, it's right here in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18. It says, it is not good for man to be alone. And really, it's not only that we are to live in the covenant relationship of marriage, that's what God is speaking to and alludes to and goes on to describe, but also what we have to realize, it's not good for us to be in isolation. That community matters, that God has designed us and invited us to live in the context of community from the very beginning. From the beginning. Now, one of the things that we learn about marriage is that and we're not going to read the verse, but in chapter 1, verse 28, it says that he speaks to Adam and Eve, and he says, go and multiply. And that's speaking of the union of marriage, the act of marriage. Y'all know what I'm talking about, the birds and the bees, right? The two shall become one, the Bible says. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, talk to your parents about it later. They'll love to talk to you about it. They can't wait to have that conversation with you. But here's the truth. The Bible talks about being fruitful and multiply, and it's talking about having children, and the reality is that it's talking about the value of community. But in that also, let me just say this, when it comes to marriage, the goal of marriage is biblically oneness. It says the two shall become one flesh. And that's not only the act of marriage, that's the reality that these two individuals are now becoming one family, one flesh, one unit. And God is the enemy of that oneness is isolation. And just think about it in the context of marriage. I understand not everybody's married this morning. I get that. But in marriage, if there's going to be a destruction in the marriage, it often happens when the two are isolated. And here's what happens in isolation. All of a sudden, it's like I haven't heard from her and I haven't heard from him. And where are they? And what are they doing? And what are they thinking? And what are they saying? And this narrative starts to go. And before you know it, it's like you're jumping off the cliff and it's been 5 minutes. And isolation, though, let's just say this. Y'all, not a single marriage in here has ever had a single argument. But when you have an argument, just so you know, if it ever happens to you in the future, I'm just kind of letting you know. Like when you have an argument, a disagreement, you will isolate from one another. And depending on your personality, some people, they want to kiss and make up right away. Others are like, you talk to the hand, I'm not talking to you for like a week at least. And you're just coexisting at that point, right? But in isolation, whether it's in the marriage, whether it's in relationship with your children or your coworkers or anybody else in your life, when there's isolation, negative narratives abound, right? Y'all know. It's like you haven't seen somebody for a while, and you see them at work, and they didn't give you the same smile that you expected, and now you're like, they're probably mad at me. And reality is like, nah, nothing like that's going on. Oh, and sometimes it is, but not always. Most often not, right? Point is, isolation. It divides us. It separates us. And that's where the enemy does his best work. The enemy does his best work when we are isolated, and we see that throughout the Bible. But today, again, God designed us for community. Not for isolation, but for unity and for community. Let me give another verse today, Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses actually 9 through 12. It says this, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. Yeah, many hands make light work. Yeah, right? We've heard that before. Many hands make light work. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either one of them falls down, one can help the other up. How many of y'all know that, like, if you don't have somebody to help you up, you better have a life alert? Right? Help me, I'm falling and I can't get up. Like you need some help. And it depends, sometimes you might fall in life physically, you might fall in life emotionally, spiritually. And when you fall down, you're going to need somebody to help you get up. And that's what it's saying. It's saying if either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But it says this, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Pity the man. Pity the person. Pity the fool. Who does not have somebody to help him up when he falls down. Not if he falls down, when he falls down. Because in life, we will fail, we will fall, and we absolutely need to live in the context of community if we're going to thrive and be our best version of ourselves. We need each other. Verse 11 says this, I love this one. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And all the men said, amen. Why do I say that? Because I went on a hike just a few weeks ago, like a couple weeks, And I'll tell you what, we camped at, was it 11,000 feet that we camped? It was right roughly around. So we camped at about 11,000 feet. I have your rock, by the way, man. It's at home, though, because I keep telling myself, just bring it to the church, and it's at home. So yeah, from the top, dude. But anyway, so we're there. We're camped. We set up camp. I've got a sleeping bag. I got all the gear. But I'll tell you what. And it wasn't just me, right, Dave? It was like every 15 minutes, I swear, I was like, and because, yeah, it's middle of the summer, but at 11,000 feet, it's not middle of the summer. And that whole night, this scripture was in my mind. I kept quoting. Also, if two lie together, they will keep warm. If two lie together, they will, Jesus, where is my partner? She's at home sleeping in a warm bed by herself right now. Actually, probably with the girls. Because that's just the way it rolls in my house. And so here I am, Lord, where is she? Turning every 15 minutes. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night because I was cold. Again, also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Verse 12, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. Right? And then it finishes out with this, and it says, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And so the reality is that like two are better than one, and the Bible reiterates this over and over again in different ways. Two are better than one. When they work together, they're going to produce more. When they sleep together, they're going to be warm. When they go through and they get in a fight, they're going to have backup. And they're going to be back to back. I envision it like let's do this. You know what I'm saying? We got this. And there's going to be a battle there that happens. But then it says a cord of what? 3 strands is not quickly broken. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And what this reality is, in the context of marriage, let me just say to all the people who are married or aspire to be married, let me just say the 3 strands in your marriage is not just husband and wife, but it's also Christ at the center of that relationship. If you want to have a relationship that's thriving, if you want to have a marriage that's thriving, notice that this principle here is that you're to also include Christ at the center of that marriage. If you want to have a marriage that lasts. Because let me just say, if y'all didn't know, marriage is tough. Like, honestly, it is tough. I don't know if it's as tough as raising children, though. Hi, daughter. How are you? Good, you're beautiful. Thank you. I love being your dad. Every day of my entire life, at every moment. Yeah. But the truth is that a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken, right? And in the marriage context, in the covenant of marriage, what we find is that the strength of a marriage doesn't come just from one person and the other person coming together, but Christ is the center of that. And I want to encourage you that, like, if you want to have a thriving marriage, that you're going to need the strength of Christ at the center of that. And let me just go on to say, like, the greater principle that's being communicated here is that a cord of 2 strands, like, is good, but not like one of 3. Let me kind of make an example here. I have here today this cord, right? It's a paracord. Y'all know what a paracord is? It's really strong. Like, this thing can do a lot of damage. Like, it can lift a lot of things. Like, I can't, there's no way I can break this. Like, I mean, think about this. I can take this cord and this paracord, and let's see how strong it is. Ready? Just kidding. It's pretty easy. But this thing is really heavy, actually. But it pulls it with ease, right? It's actually harder to put it back in place. But this cord is really strong. Let me just say this. Though it's really strong, like, the strength of this is actually from what's on the inside, not on the outside. So let me show you what's on the inside real quick, all right? All right. Here we go. You ready for this? Okay. On the inside of this, look, it's not 1 cord, but there's actually 7 in here. That's what's on the inside of this. And one of these is not very strong, although it's still pretty strong. One of these, I don't think I could actually tear it. No, not without cutting my fingers. I think I would cut my fingers before I actually tore this. But it's pretty strong. But then you take another one, and another one, and another one, and all of a sudden you have this strength of this that quite honestly, is extremely strong. Again, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And so what we have to see here is that in our lives, if we're living our lives all by ourselves, we're going to struggle. But then we need each other. We need a small group that we connect with. We need people that come around our lives. And as we find those people in our lives, all of a sudden we find strength together. We do life together. There's strength in our lives. And it's in that strength of living with one another in the context of community that God does his best work in our lives, that we thrive in the context of community. And so we need one another. In fact, it's the most important thing that we will discover in our lives. So not only has God designed us for community, and as we operate in the context of community, it's so critical. But here's what I want us to see as well. The company we keep is also important. In fact, Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 20 says it this way. It says, walk with the wise and become what? Yeah, walk with the wise and become wise. For a companion of fools becomes a fool. Notice it doesn't say that. But doesn't that make the most sense? That, like if you read it, shouldn't it say, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools becomes foolish? Like, wouldn't that make sense, the logic? Maybe it's just me that I think that way. But that's not what it says. It says, walk with the wise and become wise. Walk with the wise and you're going to find strength and wisdom. But it says this, for a companion, somebody who keeps the company of fools suffers harm. So it's not just like for a real spiritual term, it's not going to be that you become stupider by being around stupid people. I know that was real spiritual, sorry. Here's what happens. You're actually going to put yourself in harm and in danger. That's biblically what it's saying. It's saying when you gather around those people, and here's how I know this to be true in my own life. Like, when was the first time you ever got in trouble, either in your life with your parents or in the law, like any serious trouble? When was the first time that happened? Were you by yourself? Right? Never by yourself. It's like, well, she, well, he, well, they, and my mom would say, well, if your friend jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? And I'll be like, yeah? Because that's just the kind of kid I was. She's like, you ever been backhanded by your mom? Mom, I love you, by the way. You ever been backhanded by your mom? Like, some of y'all don't know. Young kids, some of y'all don't know. I'll never forget, sidetracked here again, but we'll keep on to. I'll never forget driving in a vehicle with my mother. I had been out all night, and she's like, where have you been? And I'm like, with my friends, whatever. And it's like, I'm all big and bad because, I'm a young thug. I got this, I'm like, what, son? I'm like, and I'll never forget driving with mom on my way home. She's calm. She's collective. She's letting me speak my mind. And at some point, I'm getting a little too lippy, getting too mouthy with mom. She's driving, left hand, right hand on, right here. I'll never forget because it was right in the middle of town. Marsh School was right there, and she just opened up a can of you-know-what, and she backhanded me right in my face. And I started bleeding. And that big bad thug all of a sudden started crying. And of course, my mom's like, there's more where that came from, boy. How many of y'all appreciate your moms that showed you there was a little more where that, yeah, come on, let's give them. Thank you, mama. I'm a good boy now, though. Don't backhand me again, so please, thank you. Right now, I got a fat lip from jiu-jitsu. That's a whole other story. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. When you're doing something you shouldn't do, it's usually with other people that, and I was around those people that were older, and I shouldn't have been doing things, but then I became that guy, right? And I was leading people doing things we shouldn't have done. Y'all get the point. When you're around that kind of company, you will suffer harm. Like, you didn't intend for that to happen. None of us expected that to happen, but that's what happened because you had companions that were fools and you were doing things you shouldn't have done. All right, Proverbs 15:22 says it this way. It says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. And so again, not in isolation. How many of y'all know that we can put the best plans together when we're by ourselves, but then we talk to our spouses and they go, well, what'd you think about this? And you're like, well, I hadn't thought about that yet. All big and bad and trying to right? Or you get around some of your friends, like if you have true good friends, and you have a plan put together, and you get around that plan, and they realize, well, then they ask you like, well, did you think about this, and did you think about that? And you're like, well, I just haven't thought about that yet, okay? We get all attitude about it, right? But here's the reality. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many, not some, with many advisors, they succeed. In other words, when we live in community, we thrive in community. When we live in the context of community with one another, with great advisors, we accomplish our very best in life. That is true of any and every area of our life, because ultimately, with great advisors, we succeed. And so God created us for community. And there are so many great benefits of community. And in fact, the New Testament, especially in the book of Acts, models community over and over and over again for us. Now, we're not going to read anything from the book of Acts, but there are often times that I've communicated on this subject, and you see that the early church, it says they gathered together in public gatherings like we are today, but they also met in the homes. And they gathered together in context of community. In fact, they believed in community so much, they were the kind of people that they would go and sell something, and if somebody else had a need, and together they would rally around somebody. Like, that's just the way it was. And so there was such great community that took place in the book of Acts. But the New Testament is filled with valuing community, so much so that even in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2, Paul exhorts us, he says this, carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. In other words, journey with one another. Carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. The exhortation for us is to journey with one another. You see, here's the thing. If we only live separated lives by which we see each other on Facebook or by which we're isolated from one another, we'll never know what burdens we're going through. But when you walk with somebody in community, when you know their life, you know their story, you carry each other's burdens, amen? Like you know what's going on in their lives. And let me just say that in church life, the reality is that if we only live our lives in church based on a Sunday morning experience, we're missing the best part of community. It's just the honest to God truth. Like, one of the things that a lot of people say in the context of church as a pastor, they say, and not necessarily here, but other places, right? They say, well, the church failed me. The pastor wasn't there for me. Like, I needed him and he wasn't there for me. And let me just be the first to tell you that, like, if all of your eggs are in one basket and you think I'm going to do for you what's needed in the context of the community, I'm just going to let you know right now, I'm going to fail you. I'm going to burst that bubble right now. And you're going to say, wait, what? Because I thought you would always be there for me. Well, I'm always there for you, but here's the thing. I can't read your mind. I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know what you're journeying, but when you're doing life together with other people and there's proximity and closeness, you're sharing that burden every day. You're sharing those stories. You're sharing those things, and you're walking together. One of the hardest parts about pastoring, and please hear my heart in saying this, one of the hardest parts about pastoring is that I mostly only get to hear the negatives of people's lives. I only get to hear, like, when there's trial. I only get to hear when there's struggle. I only get to hear when there's trouble. I only get to hear when marriages aren't doing well and finances are bad and people are sick. I only get to hear those things. But rarely do I ever get to hear, like, man, there's something awesome going on in my life and it's amazing. Or other thing, I rarely get to hear, like, a phone call from somebody that somebody just says, hey, how are you doing? Me? You want to know how I'm doing? I'm doing okay. Why are you calling me? And I'm exaggerating a point here, but the point is it's true of pastors, it's true of counselors, it's true of doctors. You don't go see a doctor when you're healthy, right? It's true of police officers. We don't call the police unless there's trouble in the hood. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't need a cop unless we need a cop. In fact, some of us, we don't really like cops. But then when you need a cop, where are you calling? 911, a joke in your town, 911. Anyway. So, like, You know, the point is this, like, we feel like, come on, we feel like we only come to those places. Let me just say, like, I know there's a lot of tension around police officers and injustices, and like, I'm not trying to like make a political statement. I'm just saying there's some really good cops out there, and you know what, just for once, just do something positive. Like, let them know they're doing a good job. Because there's a lot of guys that aren't, you know, and nobody gets their phone out when there's a good moment with the cop. And they're like, check it out, the cops. They only do it when the negatives happen. And trust me, like I've been on the negative side of that. I know what it's like, you know what I'm saying? So here's what I do today. I know a lot of cops. I better stay on track here, but I know a lot of cops today. They're my friends. And you know, sometimes they'll park at church and they'll be doing the thing, you know, like who's speeding. And so I'll be coming through, and as soon as I see that it's one of my friends, I do this. And then I quickly turn into the parking lot, and I'm like, what's up? And I do that kind of stuff because I just mess around with them. You know, like we just have that kind of banter back and forth. And then he'll be like, dude, like, was that it? You were going 3 miles over, dude. Like, that's all I had. You know? And the point, let me get back to the point. As a pastor, as we journey through life, so many times I only get to hear the negatives. But I'm going to miss a lot of the negatives in your life. But you know where the negatives in your life won't be missed? In the context of a life-giving small group. In the context of a ministry team in which you do life together, it's in that context that, like, honestly, next Sunday, if you're not here, I might miss the fact that you're not here. I might not realize it. In fact, a lot of people come to the church for the first time, and they visit 4 or 5 times, and I've learned to never ask, hey, is this your first Sunday here? I don't ask that anymore. Because then somebody might look at me and like, are you blind, fool? You know, like, I've been here like 5 weeks already. Is this the last time I'm ever coming to this church? So I don't ask anymore. It's just like, hey, good to see you this morning. You know? And the point I'm making is this, like, in a small group, if you're gone, you'll be missed. Like, if you're not in that circle, somebody's going to know. And so we carry each other's burdens. We do life together as we prepare to close. COVID has disrupted the continuity of community, but it hasn't destroyed it. It'll never completely destroy it. Like, I know y'all. You've had gatherings on the sneaks, you know what I'm saying? Especially during like I know it was a lot more intense during like stay-at-home orders, but I'd drive by houses, I'm like, I know they don't have 15 cars at that house. I know for a fact they do not have 15 cars at that house. And why is there so much music coming from the backyard? Ain't nobody wearing masks back there. So I know for a fact that we long for community. And I make light of it in this season. But let me just say, community will never be destroyed, but I'll tell you what, it's been disrupted. And there's a longing in all of us to live in community. Saying we don't need community is usually coming from a place of past hurt and rejection. I don't need anybody. I don't need them. The reason you're still hurt is an indication that, in fact, you did need the community that you're saying you don't need. I don't need them. I know. But at the end of the day, we need each other. We long for community. And from the very beginning of creation, God designed us for community. There are countless benefits to living in community, and we are actually encouraged to prioritize community. Last verse today, Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. Quickly, I want to highlight this as we prepare to close. It says, and let us consider how we may spur or encourage one another on toward love and good deeds. Love, the value, good deeds, the practice. It says, and let us consider how we may spur, encourage one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. Now, here's the thing. when we go back to if you can go back before, thank you. That was the perfect point I would have normally read on, but I'm slowing myself down. Thank you. Talia, you're doing awesome. Let's give her a big round. It says not giving up meeting together. Now, here's the truth, that COVID has stopped us from meeting together. And I get it, rightfully so. Like, I understand. Like, I understand all of the dynamics of this. But let me say this. We've been disrupted from community. And there's some who have yet to come back to church since pre-COVID. Some for very valid reasons. Like, their health is very compromised. They do not need to be in a building with other people. There's others who've lost touch with the church completely. Like, they've just lost all touch. How do we know that? Well, we know it because the numbers tell us. Not just these numbers. We know it because when COVID happened and we were first online, our numbers were like this. Like, they were ridiculous. And now they're back to normal. Well, all the people didn't just disappear. It's just they stopped tuning in. Why did the church here, as it's being written to the Hebrews, why were they not meeting together? What was their excuse? What was their challenge? What was their difficulty? Why? Here's why. They were being persecuted. And so when they were to gather together in the context of a community of faith, they were actually being ridiculed and persecuted. People were dying for the gospel. I don't know about you, but if that was at all a reason to stop community, that's a good reason, right? Show up to church, we're going to mark you, we're going to pay attention to you, and then we're going to actually try to kill you. Right? Be a whole different context. Be like, anybody going to church? Pastor Abel, you going to church? You are? Okay, go for me, because I don't want to go. Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another all the more as we see the day approaching. And all the more as you see the day approaching. What day? The day of the second coming of Christ. This hope that we have that He's coming again, that He will indeed come back. See, in communion, that's what He said. Until the Lord returns. There's a day He's coming back. Community must be prioritized, especially in the season of COVID, which so easily lends itself to isolation. Biblical community is the antidote for the spiritual disease of isolation. We find strength and counsel and care and encouragement in community. We experience genuine love, and that's a crash, and we're doing okay. Everybody, we're all right. We're experiencing genuine love, and we are at our best in the context of community. That's when we're at our best. And so my prayer is that you will go deep into community in the weeks ahead. That may mean I'm going to get involved in small group. That may mean for you, if you are able to, but you have come back to church, that you're going to come back to church. And maybe you're not able to. Feel no guilt or pressure about that. Be at home, be safe, take care of yourself. Maybe for you, that's not going to be at all about gathering with people, but it's going to go back to, I need to reach out to this person. I need to be in touch with them. I need to check in on them. I need to see how they're doing. I need to just see what's going on in their lives. And so I want to challenge you to make that step, whatever it is for yourself. And as a takeaway today, let's keep this in mind. We are designed for and thrive in the context of life-giving community. We're designed for it. We thrive in it. We're at our best when we're in life-giving community. And so we are designed for and thrive in the context of life-giving community. With every eye closed, as we prepare to close today, let me just say this. Whether you're watching online or you're in this building, the greatest place to understand community begins in a life-giving relationship with Christ. And so if you're here today and you say, look, I need to commit my life to Christ, or I need to recommit my life to Christ, I want to give you that opportunity. And if that's you right where you're at, would you just lift your hand real high and say, that's me. I need to commit my life. Hands going up all over this building. You say, that's me. Be bold. Just put your hand up, and then you can put it right back down. You say, that's me. I need to commit my life to Christ. or I need to recommit my life to Christ. And with that being done, we're going to pray, and I'm going to invite you. Would you pray a simple prayer after me if you raised your hand? In fact, everybody, would you pray this simple prayer? Would you just say, Jesus, today, I commit my life to you. All that I am, teach me your ways. Draw me into community. From this day forward, save me and set me free. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Can we just put our hands together and thank God?